Hi guys, Thom Hunt here in the kit room, and today's subject is going to be everything around creature baits. So how, why, when, where you will fish them, the different scenarios that I will pull a creature bait out, and I think that they really get the best out of that situation, and also a few of the rigs. There's typically three reasons that I'll cover today that I use creature baits. And the first one, and probably the most important, is going to be when I'm matching the hatch. So you can probably see from something like this, that sort of style creature bait, they're really imitating a crayfish. You know, we've got quite a few different species of crayfish in the UK. The most predominant one now is the American Signal. And they've been here for quite a while. And they're high protein baits that those perch, zander, chub, pike, pretty much everything will happily munch away on a crayfish. So I will match the hatch when there's definitely crayfish in that waterway that I'm fishing. But there's a really good top tip that I want to give you. That is a thermometer. Now, pretty much every time I go out now, I take a thermometer with me. This one's about £5 off eBay. Not very expensive, pretty accurate. Probably not the most scientific or most accurate one out there, but for the money, it's pretty good. It's quite small. It's got a meter long cable and the sensor's on the end. So I try and drop it down into the water, and I'm trying to keep an eye on that water temperature. So why is that important for crayfish? Well, anything under about 10 or 11 degrees, the crayfish are going to be quite dormant. They tend to be quite sluggish. They burrow into holes. You don't really see them a huge amount in the winter. But once that water temperature gets up to 10 or 11 degrees, they will become a lot more active. Also, by the time it's about 10 degrees, you will start to have a little bit of weed growth come up, so they're much more confident coming out of their holes, having a little bit of protection from that weed. So keep an eye on that water temperature, because the fish are hyper aware of what their food sources are throughout the year and what's in their environment. And I tell you what, as soon as those crayfish start coming out and the fish start seeing them as a really worthwhile food source, that is the time to get on your crayfish baits, because they will be switching across from bait fish or worms or soft small invertebrates, and they're such a high protein bait. The fish, predatory fish, absolutely love them. So that's the first tip I'd give. Matching the hatch, but make sure you've got the right water temperature that you're fishing them. The second thing that I'd say about crayfish, the second way that I would fish them, is in the spring, so kind of this time of year, you'll notice everything starts growing. All the flowers, all the insects, all the different, there's so many different plants, weeds, everything is warming up and growing. That is the best time to also, especially if you're on canals and small lakes where you might just be sort of street style fishing for lots of bites of lots of smaller fish, that is the best time that I will be using a drop shot rig, and I'll be using something like this. Okay, so it's a little creature style bait, but really what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to imitate insects. You've got damselfly larvae, you've got dragonfly larvae, you've got all the bloodworms are starting to hatch. All of those small invertebrates are coming up through the water, coming up to the surface, trying to hatch. And it's an absolutely superb time to use like a finesse style creature bait. So something like that. I mean, I would potentially even sort of chop this a little bit smaller, and it really is looking just like one of those invertebrates. Don't be surprised at this time of year, or when we get out fishing again after this coronavirus is cleared. Hopefully if that's April or May, particularly May, my bet is you're going to catch the most amount of species. Most species start to go predatory when all of the eggs have been put in the water. When there's tiny little fry, you'll catch everything. Roach, rudd, bream, catch bream all the time in late April and May, because they do start to go a little bit predatory. So it's absolutely cracking rig to use. Drop shot. In the Western Range, we've got these great little drop shot sticks. They're really, really high quality. One thing that really annoys me about drop shot weights is this little bit at the top there that you pinch your line into. Most of the time in other brands, I'm looking at it and it comes deformed. It comes with sharp edges on it. I've had it where I've clipped them on and it's gone straight through the line in the past. These ones are really, really good quality. So the Westin Drop It sticks, really good quality, nice dull finish. Come from, I think it's 5 gram or certainly 10 gram up to about 25 grams. So quite a big range. But that's the second reason that I would use a creature style bait. And the third reason I would use a creature style bait is when, so I've got a good story of this. We had the Lure Pro tournament final and we had Storm Kiara and Storm Dennis or whatever they were called come in. We had ungodly amounts of rain and it turned all of our waterways completely chocolate. Washed loads of run in and the fishing was terrible. But we had the final, we'd qualified for the final. So me and my partner, we went along for a few practices and we were literally just getting 1 or 2 bites. And the format was pike and perch. There was no zander in there. And we really felt that the best way we were going to do well is just to try and catch a few pike. We were looking for just 2 or 3 bites. And the bait that we settled on was what I call a hog snatching mess. And it was a mess. It was basically something like this. All right. So it had a creature bait on it. It had a skirt on it. We were using black and blue. Black and blue's very, very good. Those very dark colours in really coloured chocolate muddy water. Silhouette nicely and stand out. We also had a chatterbait blade that was on the front. But the reason we were using creature baits wasn't necessarily because we were matching the hatch. It's because they've got 2 arms flapping around and a load of appendages coming out, giving off all those vibrations, which is so much more vibration than you would get if you were fishing just a paddle tail. It's only got 1 tail, hasn't got all of the legs and all of the other appendages coming out of it. So a creature bait in that scenario was absolutely perfect. Not because the pike were going around eating crayfish, but because it was in that really coloured water. It was literally 1.5 inch visibility. The pike were effectively blind. They couldn't see the bait. So we needed a bait that was going to have lots of appendages, be really easy to be found through vibrations, got a chatterbait blade on the front, and we also put rattles in there for sound. So that is another reason that I would use a creature style bait, is because it's got 2 arms and it flaps around and it's an absolute mess in the water. Okay, so when you've got very, very limited visibility, do consider using something like that. And you can get away with much, much bigger lures than normal, because if it comes anywhere near them, generally they're going to snap at it. The last one, I'm going to give you a quick tip on how to make what I call a multi-Carolina and Texas rig. All right, so normally you've got a Texas rig where the weight, pegged or unpegged, so sliding or fixed, will be quite close to where your hook is. A Carolina rig is obviously the same sort of rig, but it has a hook length off the back, anywhere from 1 to say about 4 feet, and it gives a much, much slower fall. But this is a rig, really, really simple, just going to pass it over. It allows you to slide the weight around so you can really change your presentations, and it's something I use quite a lot with creature baits. So we take the line, take float stops, just like that. I'm going to put one of these above the weight. So I'm going to slide that on. So one above. Then I'm going to put my ball weight on that we use for Carolina and Texas fishing. Thread that on. Now you can put a bead on if you want to. It's not super necessary in this scenario. And just for speed. Now it's really important that you don't just put one of these underneath, you put 2. So you then thread on 2 float stops. So we've now got, hope you can see that there. We've got 1 above, then our weight, and then 2. And the reason we do 2 is because when you're casting, if you've only got 1, it will quite often slip. And the 2 next to each other really, really hold on nice and tight to the line. Then we're going to just tie on got a pre-rigged offset hook here with a creature bait on. Let's do a quick knot. Just stick that on. Perfect. Right, now what we can do is, because I've got one float stop above, that is effectively working like a Cheb rig or a Texas rig. Yeah, it's fixed so I can throw it in. The weight's on the front, so it's always going to be dominating the bait wherever it goes. When I'm pulling it up, the weight's then going to pull it down, and it gets a lot of movement out of this. And that's when I'm fishing much more aggressive scenarios, when the fish really want to kind of chase a bait. However, what I can do is I can then slide that one up, and that gives me slightly better presentation. So I can, you know, the fish will feel the resistance a little bit less because the weight's sliding on the line. But I can also slide these two down, and I can fix it at a foot. So my weight's fixed at a foot there, and I can fish it like a Carolina rig. Okay, so I can move it along, and then this will give me a much slower, more subtle presentation. Move it even further away, and again, I can get this much higher in the water. So generally, the deeper I'm fishing, the slightly longer, or the more negative the fish, the slightly longer, because I want more hang time, more fluttering, much more subtle, slow presentation. If they're really aggressive, then I slide it right up to the top, and I'll be punching it around on a weight like that. So there you go, guys. There's a few tips for you. A couple of different rigs on how I use creature baits, from finesse all the way up to big sizes. Keep an eye on that water temperature. Really do that all year round. Take that water temperature and your angling will become so much better. You'll really start noticing all of those patterns as we go through the different seasons. They become really clear. You'll start working out when the fish are going to come shallow for spawning, when the different crayfish are hatching and you want to swap over. You can work it out by water temperature and how they're going to behave, those predatory fish. So gives you a real good insight. Anyway, there we go, guys. Creature baits explained, and see you on the next one.